Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. I see one or two just arriving. We actually are starting 1 minute early. Isn't that terrible? Thank you all very much for coming. It is quite a cold night. It's almost like winter time, I think, isn't it, actually? So this is the Careers in Sustainability event 2017, as I was making that feeble joke last week. If you're not here for that, you're in the wrong room. And we're doing this in partnership with the University Career Service, and we're delighted to do so. This is part of ECOWeek. You may or may not have known that. Did you know that? Yes. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Great. And you'll hear more before the end about ECOWeek. My name's Dave Gorman. I'm delighted to be the Director of Social Responsibility and Sustainability here at the university. I'm going to go on slightly longer than I should and then mess up the timescale for the rest of the evening. Once I've talked for a few minutes, I'll introduce the panel, and then what we'll do is they will talk for 5 or 7 minutes, and that should mean that you've got plenty of time for questions at the end, because that's the good bit in a way. And what we hear, and I should say there's no fire drill planned tonight, so if the fire alarm does go off, then I think leave by the exits marked, and I think it's probably children and chairs of the event first, followed by everybody else, if that's all right. So why are we here tonight? We're trying to bring together current students, some of our alumni and recent graduates, talk about careers in sustainability and actual careers. So these are real people. And why did they take these careers? What have been the challenges? What have been the inspirations? What gets them out of bed in the morning? What do they actually do? And allow you to respond to some of that. There's also some stall holders out the back, so if you haven't had a chance to go and interact with them, please do so. And I was talking to one of them who said actually some people got jobs out of that last year, so you might want to talk to them as well. But just before we actually get into the meat of it, what do we know about where we are in sustainability? I'm not going to mention what. Politics, I'm not going to mention that. But we know that last year, it's now official, last year was the hottest year on record, beating the previous year, which was 2015, which was the hottest year on record, beating the previous year, which is 2014, which was the hottest year on record. You probably know that all the hottest years on record have happened since 1998. There is no global warming pause, you must know that. The hottest decade on record is the one just finished. That beat the one before that, which was also the hottest on record, and so forth and so on. So we have some challenges. I'm told, and Amanda might know about this, there's going to be more plastic than fish in the sea if we're not careful by about 2050. So we have challenges, and we are making progress, particularly in Scotland. We met our 42% reduction target 6 years early. So the target was to cut emissions by 42% by 2020. We did it by 2014. Fantastic. So we are making progress on climate change, but we've got a lot more to do. So we need to figure out, we've done it for power. We're starting to decarbonise power in Scotland and across the world. How do we do that for heat? We rely on gas a lot of the time in Scotland. How do we store energy in a way that's going to manage intermittent demand from renewables? How do we shave off demand by having more efficient? You'll probably look back at the end of your careers perhaps and say, do you remember when you used to do those stupid great power stations? And then they used to have this one-way power. So what was that about? So thinking that through, how do we have low carbon agriculture? How do we grow food in a sustainable way? How do we cut the carbon and other implications of flying? How do we have buildings that are sustainable and healthy for you? How do you move people around and do that in a way which is carbon friendly? How do we have people friendly, low carbon, resilient buildings and places? And once we've sorted all that for climate change, how do we then sort out the oceans, which we're busy buggering up as we speak? How do we create more sustainable forests and restore our peatlands? How do we stop destroying nature, damaging it, removing species forever? How do we stop breaking apart habitats, introducing alien species and polluting the whole thing at the same time? How do we build more resilient ecosystems that can deal with climate change? How do we then say to people, let's run a circular economy, don't buy something and then put it in the bin 30 days later? How do you have a modular approach or a recyclable approach or a reusable approach? So those are some of the challenges. And then, of course, doesn't just mean science and engineering. It also means human psychology and change. Why don't people change when you show them the evidence? It's bloody annoying, actually. Look, just read this. Why don't they actually do that? How do people, what motivates people to change? And what new business models, which some of you are probably working on, do you then need in order to make these things happen? Because money talks still these days. And how do you have a sharing economy? So who takes part in the sharing economy? This is the kind of, Uber and these kind of things and Airbnb and stuff like that. Brilliant, right? So you're busy dematerializing, but you're also sometimes destroying value in the economy and disrupting in a way which doesn't think about social systems as well. So some of the worries about the sharing economy. And how do you build more these issues into the economy itself, so that when somebody celebrates economic growth, they celebrate it in a way which is also sustainable or thinks about humans. And then what evidence and skills do you need to do all that? And what professional development, and how do you develop a culture of sustainability? These are all going to be your solutions. Need to be coming from you, really. So my generation's been busy setting up a bunch of problems for you. You're very welcome. And I think the careers in sustainability now, these days, is going to be about solutions, really. So there are a fantastic series of opportunities, I would say, regardless of what you're interested in. So I was asked to say a few words about my career, how did I get here, and then much more interesting, you'll hear from the panel. I started out as an engineer, mostly because I couldn't really think what to do. My dad was an engineer. I then decided, after graduating as an engineer, that wasn't really for me, so I wandered off, much to his disgust, to do voluntary work for a few years to see what it was really like to be homeless or try and help people who were drug addicts and all kinds of things. I ended up blundering into the environment by complete chance, where I was reading the paper one day, wondering what I should be doing, and it said, do you want to work in the environment? I thought, yeah, I do, actually, yeah. And I was fortunate to get the support to start then. I got a master's and I moved from there. My first ever job was as a recycling officer in Dundee City Council in 1993, 92. And in them days, what you really do with waste is you sort of picked it up, drove it to a hole in the ground, dumped it there, and then covered it up. And my job was to say recycling. And I remember being told by a bunch of older white men, actually, well, that's a giant waste of time. I don't know why you would do that. So my first lesson for my career is just don't listen to the people who don't want to make change. Just ignore them, right? Just follow what you think is right, if the evidence and the passion is there. I then moved on to work in councils. You're all probably far too young to remember local Agenda 21 officers. Anybody remember? You probably research it now. Hey, it's probably a historic topic. Oh, God. Anyway, so my job was to implement sustainability in a local council. And from then I moved to SEPA, and I did a variety of jobs, finishing as head of strategy before I came here. And when I look back, I said, let's say, work hard would be one of my pieces of advice. Don't be lazy. Well, it might work for you, but I always worked hard. Like I say, don't listen to the old farts who tell you it can't be done and that what you're doing to make change isn't right. They're just vested interests. They've got wisdom. Listen to people when they've got wisdom, but don't let them block you. Keep going when it's difficult to make progress, and also, I guess, follow your passion is the thing I eventually learned. Do the thing that you really enjoy that will help you make a change. So that's enough from me. I probably massively overran already. Let me introduce the panel, and then we'll move on to hearing from them. So I'll just work my way through, and I bet I get the name right away. Daisy Narayanan. Was that right? Oh, thank you very much. Who's the acting director from Sustrans, Scotland. Welcome, Daisy.
Thank you, Dave.
Round of applause for Daisy for us. And then moving down the panel, we've got Amanda Ingram, who's the Bioeconomy project manager from Zero Waste Scotland. Welcome. And we have Robert MacGregor, who's the associate director from Aecom. Welcome, Robert. And finally, we have Andy Kirk, who's the Associate Director from Bennetts Associates. Welcome, Andy. Now, normally I drone on even more about people's biographies, but the very point of this, of course, is you're going to hear that as we go. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask Daisy to kick us off. We'll hear 5 minutes or so from each panel member, and then we'll move to questions. So, Daisy, over to you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me at the back? Brilliant. I might just stand up, actually. That's all right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dave, for that introduction. It's so inspiring to hear other stories as well, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's stories and your questions. It's wonderful to be here for several reasons. 12 years ago, I came to Edinburgh University from the US as a postgraduate student in design. And I was going through a difficult phase in my life. I was unsure about where I was going next. I needed to reevaluate stuff about myself and what was important to me. And my 1 year in Edinburgh University doing my master's helped me do exactly that. It gave me the space to think, gave me the space to innovate, to refocus my thoughts. So for that, I'll be forever grateful to Edinburgh University. So thank you once again for having me here. So I'm Daisy Narayanan. I'm the acting director for Sustrans Scotland. I lead a team that designs and delivers cycling and walking infrastructure projects in partnership with local authorities and other statutory organisations across Scotland. I graduated from the University of Bombay as an architect in 1997. It feels like a long, long time ago when Claire asked me to put together some of my, what have you done and how did you get here, your journey. I went back, looked at my CV, and I thought, oh my word, that sounds quite fragmented, but also exciting now when I think back at what life was like. I've had the good fortune to have lived and worked in India. I've lived in Singapore. I've lived in the US and in the UK, in Edinburgh and in London. So I have been really fortunate to have been immersed in different cultures and different ways of working, different ways of how we live and work within our built environment here. In Bombay, I had my own practice as an architect, which was both incredibly satisfying and incredibly terrifying. A stint with a multinational company took me to Singapore, and personal circumstances to America, where, again, I dabbled in set design, in design for theater, in sound. It was really, again, exciting, but I wasn't quite sure what next, and when I grow up, what am I going to do? So a postgraduate degree in Edinburgh, as I said, it opened the doors to some fantastic design practices, some brilliant design ideas. I worked with some amazing, brilliant architects across Edinburgh and London. And I worked on the Robert Burns Birthplace Museum in Ayrshire, the St James's Quarter project here in Edinburgh, and some lovely regeneration projects in London. But again, there was something missing. I felt that we were building these big shopping centres and calling it urban design, and somehow were we sucking the life out of our high streets, out of things that were important to us. A group of us used to meet every now and again at design forums, and we used to talk about sustainability, about environment, about things that we really cared about. We had a philosophy, we used to call it, how do you tread lightly on the ground? Because we're not here that long in the grand scheme of things. And it got me thinking, I got married, I was going to be a parent, and I thought, what kind of place do I want to live in, to work in, to play in? And what kind of life am I leaving behind for the next generation? And so fast forward to 2012, and when this role with Sustrans came up, I was absolutely overjoyed because it allowed me to marry my day job with something that I believed in passionately, intensely, being active, being healthy, working in projects that put people and place at its very heart, and to recalibrate our streets, which are so car-dominated. I noticed that in your talk about climate change, transport wasn't mentioned, and that reflects in what we're doing because transport is faring quite badly in the whole climate change agenda at the moment. So to recalibrate our streets towards people on foot and on bike. And for those of you who don't know Sustrans, it'd be interesting to see a show of hands of who's heard of Sustrans before. That's really good. So for those of you who don't know, we are the UK's leading sustainable transport charity. And we've been around for about 40 years. We started off as a very small radical movement in a pub, I think, in Bristol. And now we've grown over the past 40 years. We're over 600 people. And we're delivering quite exciting infrastructure and behavior change projects and working directly with the communities who are involved and who are affected by the changes that we're hoping to bring. And we've also seen in the past few years, I don't know whether it's through Chris Hoy and the general awareness about cycling increasing. And as part of that, we see a rise in investment in cycling and walking projects as well. So today in Sustrans, Scotland, our teams manage multi-million-pound budgets on behalf of Scottish Government. We work on projects that are increasing in scope and remit. And to just give you a very quick introduction to what we do, we broadly work within 3 strands. We design and deliver physical infrastructure projects in partnership with organizations. The National Cycle Network is our big infrastructure project. Behavior change programs that we work directly with schools, with universities, with hospitals, with workplaces, community groups, just to promote people using the infrastructure that's built. And then our influencing work, where we work with decision makers, politicians at the national level, at the local government level. I'm sorry. So co-design innovation is at the very heart of what we do. Every project we deliver is in partnership with support from our partners and support from the end users. And my colleagues, who are the best thing about Sustrans the past 5 years, we come from diverse backgrounds. We've got transport planners, urban designers, architects. I think we've got a couple of lawyers, ecologists, people who've come from the life sciences, all bound together by this common thread of believing passionately in making a better world around us. And it's an exciting time to be in the environmental sector. And again, I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's stories and your questions. And just to end on, Claire mentioned advice. What advice would you give? And you have the usual cliches. Don't take risks. Don't be afraid to fail. Have rigor and integrity in what you do, whether it's a small task or a big sweeping piece of work. But for me, I think the biggest thing is to be curious, be excited. It's difficult in this day and age not to be cynical about things you see around you, but be excited by everything whether it's big or small. Just be excited. And when things don't go very well, I have something that keeps me going, and it's a picture of my son. There, let's put it up. He was 4 years old and he's 6 now. And the joy on his face when he cycles is just incredible. So that's what inspires me and gets me going every day.
Thanks very much. Excellent. Thanks, Daisy. Straight on to Amanda.
Okay. Is my mic on?
It should now come on, yeah.
Okay. So I'm Amanda. I work for Zero Waste Scotland. For those of you that don't know, that's an organisation that are currently funded by the Scottish Government. We were established to create a sort of shift change across Scotland to create a society that uses resources better and avoids the generation of waste ultimately. We are our kind of mission is to do that through enabling and influencing change. And we do that through various mechanisms, through providing advice and assistance to businesses and to other organisations. We provide funding and support to businesses. We support the development of new innovations and technologies, and we do a lot of communication and awareness work to enable that change. We're tasked with delivering the Scottish Government have a circular economy strategy, and there's a European economic strategy which we help to deliver. And as part of that, we're sort of trying to move Scotland away from just thinking about reduce, reuse and recycle when it comes to waste, but also looking at circular economy opportunities, which are rather designing a process or a product or a service in such a way that it would eliminate waste altogether. So looking at the actual materials that are used and the way that they're used. So as part of that, the bioeconomy fits into part of that. That's the area that I lead on for Zero Waste Scotland, and that relates to any biological or organic materials like food waste or other materials that we have in Scotland, looking at adding value to them so that they're no longer a waste, but they're actually a feedstock for another process. So for example, at the moment, Scotland grows a lot of potatoes. A lot of those potatoes can't be sold to supermarkets because they have a specific size that they require when you sell them to supermarkets. So those that are the wrong shape, should we say, often just get fed to cattle or get ploughed back into the land. But there's various things you can do with that. There's a company making a very high value vodka from that waste. So they've actually eliminated the waste altogether, and they now actually create a high value product. So we're looking at opportunities to use biological materials to make new products, and that could also be making new plastics like bioplastics from algae material and that kind of thing. So I work quite closely with businesses, mainly innovative businesses, through a support service and a circular economy fund that we have. So how I got there, it's a bit of a kind of long, tangled story as well. I was also trying to sort of cast my mind back to, and I've suddenly realised how many jobs I've actually had. But they have all had a theme, which is waste and resource management. And I think, I don't know where I was initially inspired by that, but I've always, even as a kid, always been interested in sort of the environment and people. And when I studied, first of all, I did environmental geography at Aberdeen University, and I suppose then started to realise the links between the environment and people and society, and got really interested in that. So after that, I worked for a year in West Africa, doing some work for an NGO, came back and did a MSc here at Edinburgh University in environmental protection and management in 1999. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I will. So I really wanted to do my dissertation on waste management, but at the time I was kind of told that wasn't taught here at the time. It wasn't really a thing at the time. We had a recycling rate in Scotland of 5%, and there wasn't a huge amount of interest. So I was kind of people tried to dissuade me from it, but I did it anyway.
Sure. I know. It wouldn't happen now.
And yeah, a few years later, I was invited back to give as a guest speaker because they were then teaching the course. But at the time, it wasn't really a thing, and for me, it's been quite an exciting journey to go from that, that period of time when no one was really talking about it to then, one of my first jobs was I used to give environmental advice to small businesses, and as part of that, we got involved in. There was a national waste plan for Scotland, and that's where people started really going, right, we've got, like, Dave was saying earlier, there's all this waste in landfills, what are we doing? We can't carry on doing that. So I got involved in the national waste plan work for Scotland, and there I met some other organisations who then asked me if I wanted to come and work with them to do awareness raising campaigns for local authorities. So I did that for a number of years, and then I've also then went on to work for a local authority, delivering their not only waste aware campaigns, but also looking at the infrastructure on the ground, because it's not enough just to know, how to fix the problem or how we're going to deal with it, but you have to instigate change, and change is the biggest, I'd say it's the biggest kind of barrier to the things I've done in my career, but also the biggest barrier to waste and resource management, because you can have all the best ideas in the world, you can have all the most fantastic innovation that you have, but if you can't get people to buy those products or take forward the change, then you may as well not bother. So there's been a lot of hurdles like that along the way. Even when I worked in the local authority, we were trying to just do something simple like take away individual bins from people's desks. In the head office, there was 2,000 bins in there. Every night the cleaner was having to empty them all. We wanted to take them all away and just put 20 banks of recycling containers. Sounds quite easy. You would have thought we were proposing like cutting off arms and legs. It went down like a complete lead balloon, and then so we had to do a lot of awareness and campaign and kind of thank you messages, and letting people know that this is how much we saved for the council, this is what it equates to in school fees or whatever it happens to be, and within 2-3 weeks people are sort of saying, why are we not doing this across the whole of the council, we should be doing more. And you think you need to bring people with you on the journey, or it's not really going to work. So a lot of those kind of things have happened along the way. I was trying to think, where was I? I was at the council. Where did I go after that? Oh, so then I came to Zero Waste Scotland, and I'd say with a lot of my jobs that I've had, they've all had the same theme, which has been waste and resources. But sometimes I have needed to kind of sidestep to get. I wanted to work in the circular economy team at Zero Waste Scotland, but there was a job in the communications team, and I knew I could do that, so I kind of started there and then managed to sidestep across. So sometimes there's not always the most direct path, but I think, like you said earlier, if you can find a topic that an area that you're inspired by and you're interested by, you're almost certainly going to be good at that job. I think some of my friends have gone down the path of chasing the big bucks and not necessarily thinking about what are they interested in, and they find themselves to be the same age as me, and they're now back kind of wondering what to do with their life. So I think for me anyway, the thing would be find an area that you're interested in and follow that theme, and do networking. A lot of the jobs I've had have been, I've always had to go to the interview obviously, but you find out about what organisations do, what organisation you might fit into well or you don't through networking. And there's lots of events you can often blag a free place at, and you could get along to a conference and you meet a ton of people there, or even joining a membership. Like for me, Chartered Institute of Waste Management, I met a lot of people, a lot of professionals, and find jobs there. Sorry, I'm rambling. I have no idea how I did for time there.
That's just about bang on. Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. Round of applause for her. And I thought you'd planned it. So, over to Robert.
Thank you. I work for a company called Aecom, who are a massive multinational company. They're sort of loosely to do with engineering. We have all kinds of people, environmental scientists, architects. I sit in a team called Buildings and Places, and I lead our sustainability group in Scotland, which is part of our team of about 100 people in the UK. We do quite a lot of different types of projects. We do things like district heating studies and designs. We do energy strategies for clients. We'll look at new buildings and do assessments on them through some existing schemes to help them be more sustainable. We help sometimes on research on policy for governments or government organisations. So that's sort of some of the things we do. We do quite a lot of energy efficiency work as well, so going around existing buildings to see what could be improved, what things you might change there. Some of it's about behavioural things, so it's not just changing the light bulbs or those sorts of measures. It can be trying to get people to use one bin instead of a bin under their desk. So there's a lot of different things to it. I started off at Aecom as a graduate about 9 years ago. There was a team of 2 of us at that point. We're now 4, soon to be 5. My manager left quite soon after I joined, not because I joined, the reason to add. At least she told me that wasn't the reason. But we've managed to sort of keep going through the recession and grow the team and sort of expand out the types of work we do. A lot of that has been because there's a really good network of people inside the company that, you know, that do the same sorts of work, so you can get in touch with them and say, I saw Edinburgh University have put out this opportunity to do a study. It looks really interesting. Who can help me do this? And you know, you find people that will help and support you to take these opportunities. So that's kind of how we've grown the team and got more interesting work coming through in Edinburgh. I've mentioned Edinburgh University. We've done quite a lot of work with them over the years I've been there. So some of it's been looking at across the entire estate where you might make some big changes in the carbon emissions through engineering. So again, lots of district heating or putting solar panels or wind turbines if possible within the estate. More recently worked with Dave's team looking at, colleagues did some research on best practice in higher education sector across the globe for reducing carbon. We looked at producing business cases for some of those possibilities to help university here and other universities, you know, roll out some of these things potentially. One of my other favourite projects I've worked on at Aecom is in a wee village called Applecross, which is up in the North West Highlands. Do any of you know Applecross? Yeah, a few. So there's about, I don't know, there's probably about 50 houses scattered around a few miles, so there's not a whole lot there. But they've now built a hydro scheme, but because it's in the middle of nowhere, there's a very small grid connection to get there, so they couldn't send out the power they were producing. So we looked at what you might do with the power. So we looked at all kinds of things, you know, maybe they could get an electric vehicle, but they're a huge hill to get anywhere, so that didn't look the most practical thing, and the village is tiny anyway. So what we came up with in the end was using the extra power to try and heat the homes and the pubs in the village. So I spent quite a lot of time up there speaking to the people up there, having a look around and trying to figure out how that would work. So that was, you know, a really interesting type of project. It was quite different as well. No one had done an awful lot of that type of thing. So those are the sorts of things I really enjoy, and I suppose they get me out of bed in the morning and coming into work. Like everyone else, I seem to have taken a bit of a meandering path to get to where I am. I left university and some friends were setting up a recording studio and hoping to set up a film studio, and they were organising lots of concerts and things, so I thought that sounds way more fun than a job, so I did that for a few years, but it didn't make any money. The parents wanted me out of the house, so I went off and was teaching English for a bit as well, and then eventually I was getting to the point I was going to get married and settle down and thinking what could I do more constructively with a better career opportunity. And I was working in a university at the time, and they had a reasonable selection of English language books, so I just kind of worked my way through them, and the ones that really were interesting were the ones on energy and buildings. So I thought, right, I could do something there. I was good at maths and physics, so that's probably the way forward. And then looked into courses, did an MSc, and then that got me sort of into the job at Aecom, and it's worked out really well. So I mean, I think for me, quite a lot of people I knew, some had a really good idea from the day they were sort of born, I think, of what they would do when they sort of left university and went through. Loads of other people were very unsure, and I think most people eventually have found something that suits them. Some are actually moving away from more money-oriented careers now to things that do interest them a bit more. But I think, you know, if you just keep your eyes open and be aware of opportunities and sort of try things, you'll find a way to get to somewhere appropriate. And I mean, I think the great thing with sustainability is there's all kinds of things possible. You know, so I'm more interested in engineering and numbers, but a lot of colleagues are, you know, not so much numerical, have different types of interests, and there's possibilities in it all.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. Andy.
Hi, I'm an architect. I work for a company called Bennetts Associates. We have a studio in Edinburgh, one in Manchester, and our headquarters in London. And we're about 90 strong. We also do quite a lot of work with the University of Edinburgh. We're probably best known for the Informatics Forum, which is just on the edge of George Square. And we're currently doing the Data Technology Institute, which is the final phase, which will complete that city block, if you like. And we're also doing the new business school, which is in the old infirmary building, part of the quarter mile development. Probably nationally, we're better known for the transformation of the Royal Shakespeare Company's theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon. But we also do a lot of, we work across most sectors, and I think that part of our DNA, if you like, as a practice is that we have a great focus on sustainable design, and without blowing a trumpet, we've probably got a pretty good reputation across the country for doing that. And I mean, I guess primarily one of the key things that we try to focus on is reducing the energy demand of the building. So you're using passive means of design before you start looking at any active measures of engineering or renewables beyond that. But more fundamentally, I think one of the key things about designing buildings is that they should be flexible and adaptable, so that you can change things over time, and you don't end up designing a building that becomes obsolete in a short period of time and has to be pulled down and rebuilt, because that's an enormous waste of resource and material. And it's that sort of approach, I think, is critically important for most buildings, but it's critical for education buildings, because there's competing demands between the user groups, who are the people who are going to be using the building initially, and the landlord, if you like, which is the estates. And the landlord wants a building that they can last for decade after decade after decade, and the users are like a tenant who might not be there in a few years' time. So you have to be very careful in how you keep both sides of that fence happy. I was thinking a bit about sort of my own background. Listening to everyone, you'll pick up there's a common theme that the jobs we do now are not the jobs that we did at the start of our careers, and I'm no different. But before I touch on that, I think there's one thing which I started doing when I was quite young, which has been one of the biggest influences in my life. I started going hill walking and then climbing from a reasonably young age. And I've done a lot of that, and I've travelled around the world and seen some amazing places. And I suppose it's given me a kind of a spiritual connection with nature, and also allowed me to see how fragile ecosystems are across the world. And it doesn't take much to actually damage that without realising that you're doing that. And I did a few things earlier in my career, but I ended up working for the oil industry, funnily enough, which was great because it was loads of money, and I had lots of time off. So I could feed my passion for climbing by having, usually people have got money and no time, or you've got time and no money, but to have both was an amazing thing to do. And I had an opportunity, a crossroads, and an opportunity to what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And I ended up studying architecture. And while I was studying, I think one of the lecturers in particular was a big influence on me. He's the professor at the Mackintosh School in Glasgow called Colin Porteous, and he was very, very keen, still is, in low energy design. And that was a big influence on my career, because the connection with the outdoors, and sort of an affinity, if you like, with the natural world, and doing something to help that by the way we design buildings, I found very appealing. And he put me in touch with Bennetts Associates, and I did my year out with them, and then went back when I had completed my studies. So again, that was kind of quite a sort of circular route to get to where I am now. And I think that rather than just thinking about, people probably think architects, buildings, but actually it was one of the things that Daisy had picked up on right at the beginning about places. And it's actually more important. I think it's one of Jan Gale's quotes, who's an urban designer, that you should design for people first, and then the spaces in between buildings, and the buildings last of all. And quite a lot of developers who've got their heads screwed on will adopt that approach. Argent did that at the massive King's Cross development in London, where they designed all the infrastructure and all the public spaces first, and then the buildings kind of come in later as a sort of a backdrop to that. So I guess that's more or less what I was going to say just now. But
thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Okay, so you've heard from us. You've been sitting patiently, hopefully. So now it's your turn. So what we'll do is, what I normally find is that if I ask a question at a time, take them. There's only around for a couple of questions before we run out of time. So what we're going to try is 3 questions at a time. And then basically the panel will try and pick the ones they think most suitable for them. And we'll try and remember the 3 questions too. But if we forget your question, do remind us. So that's what we'll do. If you just want to have a show of hands, we'll take the first 3 and we'll get through as many as we can. So or maybe we have no questions at all, in which case we're done. First questions. Here's one at the front.
Hi, thanks very much. This isn't for anyone in particular. Obviously, you're all based in Scotland. How, in your experience, how important is it to be mobile as to where you're working in the UK or in the world in this kind of sector?
Okay, great. Let's see if we have any more questions. If not, we'll just deal with that one. Any more questions at the minute? You're just all shy, aren't you? Oh, there we go. You're not really. One at the back, thanks.
So just looking forward as far as how to get what we're learning and what we want to make happening, what are kind of the hurdles that you've come across trying to get what you see working or what you want to see working to the public's understanding and getting people on board or getting them to listen or getting them to try? Just advice for turning action into a career.
Great, great question. Do we have one more before we take questions, or? No, in which case let's do those 2 questions. And so the importance of being mobile for your career, and then hurdles, which is maybe related in some way. But how do you actually make change, and how do you get people on board? Shall we just go down the panel?
Great questions, both of them. I think from my perspective, being mobile is essential, because you have to see and learn from what's happening across the world. So if you're talking about walking and cycling, as Andy mentioned, there's Jan Gehl in Copenhagen. Copenhagen was 30, 40 years ago what we are today over here, very car dominated. And to learn from how they've gone from that to being a utopia for people who walk and cycle is wonderful. So to learn best practice, to be able to share best practice, I think for us it's imperative to open our thoughts across the world. In terms of challenges and hurdles, for me personally, there's a couple of things. One is, as a woman in transport, I have found it to be taken. I find women get taken less seriously in the sphere of transport. It's changing now. It's getting better. I remember going to meetings 5 years ago, and people would say, "Oh, you're here to take notes," and then they say, "Oh, no, I'm actually chairing the meeting." So that's something in terms of the culture of how things change and need to change. We're getting there. Cycling is seen as quite divisive. So how do you make cycling mainstream, and how do you make walking and cycling normal is something that we grapple with every day. And I think for me, the fundamental thing that needs to change, and what we're trying to do, is change the language around walking and cycling, and to change the narrative to public health, to quality of life, to quality of place, rather than walking and cycling.
Excellent. Thanks. Amanda?
I might take your question first, if that's all right. I think in terms of, first of all, being the one getting into the career to make that change, certainly there's a lot of organisations who are looking to have a change, but they maybe don't have the funding, or they can't justify the member of staff. So sometimes doing your dissertation or getting some voluntary experience is often the best way. And that, I forgot to mention that in my ramble earlier, but that's actually how I got my first job. I did my dissertation with the National Trust for Scotland, and they kept me on as an employee, and then that led to another job. But when I first started in that, probably, and actually throughout my career, probably one of the toughest challenges is getting people to believe what you're saying or really take an interest in for businesses particularly, but I think it's the same across, sadly, it's the same across all sectors. It comes down to money. If you can show that there are cost savings, or that, you know, the opportunities you've identified are, you know, equivalent to the existing scenario, then you're going to be able to break down those barriers. But I think at the moment, often it's very difficult to get people's interest if you can't link things back to the finance side of it, or bring them along on the journey with you. I mean, a lot of the communication materials, you know, we run a lot of focus groups when I worked for the Scottish Waste Awareness Group to find out, well, what messages do people want to hear, what's going to encourage them to make a change, you know, and it would be different for different groups. Some local authorities would, you know, say, you know, the community would say, well, we're interested in how this relates to school places or teachers, because that's an issue for us, whereas the next area would say, well, we're only going to be interested in that information if you use the right logo, because we, you know, for example, Bennetts don't consider themselves to be in Falkirk, but they're part of a Falkirk Council, and it might seem like a small thing, but if you put the Falkirk Council logo on their information sheet, it can be a real turn-off. So it's trying to do almost a focus group scenario to find out what works for different people. But I think in terms of, your question's a bit harder for me because we're currently funded by the Scottish Government, so we're kind of limited by, you know, only working in Scotland, but we do look at technologies that exist in other countries and say, if they work there, is that something that could work in Scotland? And we do that quite a lot. We look at that.
Okay, I think I'll start on your one. That's an easy one to start on. So our team are just working really in Scotland just now, and we generally pull in support from other parts of our wider company because we've got plenty to do up here. But there are people in the wider team in the UK that are working on international projects. And I think, I mean, it's very much, if there's a strong desire for someone to do that, then it's a possibility. I travelled a lot before I sort of came back to Edinburgh with a sort of intention of settling down a bit more. So it's kind of possible to do both, but I think it is really quite important to get out and see lots of the world and see how things are done elsewhere. I mean, that's really sort of helped even in my career, although I'm based in Scotland, understanding how people have gone about things in different ways and the success they've had is really important. The district heating stuff, we're forever having events. I was here last week, I think it was, for a day for something. Danish people over here tell us how to do district heating because they've done it all for 50 years and they've got it really well, working really well. So things like that, you know, it's always going to be common, no matter what aspect you're looking at, that you try and learn from other countries and other people. In terms of dealing with the, you know, getting things to happen, I guess, I think the easiest ones for us, you know, when we're advising clients are the ones where, you know, changing light bulbs, you know, it will cost you this much to put in, you know, the benefits this, and it's pretty obvious it's worth doing that. But it's all the ones about behaviour, so you're trying to encourage people, say, just to switch off the computers or something like that. And I was trying to do that within our company as the sort of green office person for a while. And you know, you just have to keep providing information, encouraging people and all these sorts of things. And it slowly sort of works away, but it's a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of time in some cases. And I think for, you know, for breaking in, I guess, into careers and that sort of thing as well, I started at Aecom because I spoke to my tutor and sort of said during my MSc, this is what, you know, I'm really interested in, and who would you suggest I speak to? And they sort of pointed me And that was, you know, I sort of said energy efficiency and energy use in buildings, and he put me in touch with Aecom basically. So there's things like that, which comes back to the networks point really. I think it's just, you know, being in touch with different people and speaking to them and sort of seeing who has information relating to the sort of things you're interested in.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Andy?
I'll start with this one again. I guess, you know, the technology that we have nowadays enables people to work remotely in ways that, well, you couldn't even, I suppose, 10 years ago. I mean, a very simple example with our practice is we have a video conferencing system, and so every month we have a management meeting. In fact, we had one this afternoon. So there's 3 of us in the management team in Edinburgh, and we sit in a room in Edinburgh, and there's people in London. So we don't have to travel to London in order to do that, which is great. So, but only 10 years ago, we would have had to go to London. So it's like, oh, do you fly, or do you take the train, or well, what time are the trains, and you miss a day of work? And so there's all these decisions. But I mean, I think technology has opened up lots of opportunities for a more global reach. But I mean, as a designer, the other thing which I guess from a sustainability or environmentally friendly perspective, having a local response, I think, is actually quite important. So the idea of me trying to design something halfway around the world is, I'm not sure I'm particularly comfortable with that, you know, and consequently having someone from halfway around the world designing something here, is that ideal? I don't know whether it is or not. And there's been one of the issues globally is a sort of what you might call international style. You know, a building that can be designed in isolation of its environment surely is not a good way of designing buildings. You look at, I mean, the Middle East is a key example. Dubai, I mean, the buildings that are being designed and built in Dubai are huge. You know, they could be anywhere. They're not specific to the Middle East. They're huge energy guzzlers, because that's the solution. You create a problem and you have to solve it by throwing energy at it. So that's maybe a little bit off message. I don't know. And I guess the other thing with the kind of hurdles, I mean, there's 1 or 2 excellent points, but the only thing I would add to that is that having knowledge of something is extremely important. So do your homework first, and you probably find that a lot of the people that you interact with or you come across don't know things as well as you think that they might do.
Great. How are we doing for questions? Do we have more brewing? Which not? Let's just have a think for a second. I'll make a comment. So I used to always beat myself up because I thought I was very insular early in my career, actually, and didn't travel very much because my dad had been an oilman and we travelled a lot then, and I regret that now. But I would say at the mobile point, it depends on your job in a way. So in this job now, I'm expected to travel a lot. So between me and my right-hand person, in the last few years, we've been to Hong Kong and China, Italy, Canada, the US, because the expectation here is that we'll understand global best practice, and you can't always do that remotely. But in some of the jobs, you might be able to not have to travel. But the thing to me is I broaden it. It's like to say, be curious, as someone said earlier. The expectation is now to know what it looks like around the world, success and failure, because sometimes when you're in a certain perspective, you don't realize how much you've got this set of assumptions. And then you go to another place, you say, God, none of that actually applies, or it applies differently. So that would be my thing. And then on how do you make change? Well, see if you're a director like me, don't bring me problems all the time, right? Don't. You know, if you've got a cat or a dog and somebody walks into the room and says, good news, they've just messed the carpet up, and then they walk out. Oh, brilliant. Oh, thanks very much. You brought me a fantastic problem. When they come in and say, they've just made a mess on the carpet and I've also cleaned it up, and here's a glass of wine. Oh, thanks very much. It doesn't happen very often. You see the point there? So sometimes when you're trying to make change, bring solutions alongside the problem, right? So don't expect to applaud it if you just say, look at this giant problem I've now given to you. think about if you're the boss, you want solutions. Or if you're going to identify a problem, identify why that problem matters. So if in the public or the private sector, why does it matter to the minister or the senior civil servant that this problem is being brought to their attention? Or if you're in the private sector, why does it matter this problem requires an answer? And that this might be an opportunity. So think about that, I guess. And then also think about language, I would say. So as somebody was just saying, everybody has a different language, right? So if you're trained as an engineer, then you might know what three-phase voltage is, right? But the finance director doesn't know and probably doesn't care. And the finance director certainly talks the language of net present value and return on investment and cash flow forecasts. But the director of HR may or may not have an interest in that. And then somebody who's doing theoretical physics may have absolutely no interest in anything except quarks. And so you've got to try and, in a way, find a language that engages with the people that you want to make the change with. And what you find is the bigger the problem sometimes, the more interconnected it is, the more you've got to have a series of languages. Or really simply tell a story. I'm going to mention Donald Trump. I got so far. His politics don't appeal to me in any way. And what he's trying to do and what he stands for doesn't appeal to me. But I don't think you could take away from that. He's got a story, right? Do you remember what Hillary Clinton's story was? I'm not sure, but it's something about carrying on with more of the same. And his story was Make America Great Again. Or the joke I was making last week is, again, without getting too political, the Scottish National Party stand up for Scotland. I remember that. As a good Liberal Democrat, I can say this. The Liberal Democrat message, I think we could make some marginal changes to the NIC Class 2 contributions. You get my point. We must have some questions by now. If not, we're just going to talk to ourselves. Yep, there's one over there. Oh, now we're warming up. One there and then one there. Good stuff. And we'll just take both of them and then we'll try and answer them.
Thanks. Hi. Working in sustainability, do you ever get frustrated that your organization isn't doing enough to create sort of more radical change? And if so, how do you deal with that? Do you try to push it, but you have to sort of be realistic when you come up against economic and political realities? And how do you come?
Fantastic. Great question.
Brilliant question.
And then there was one over here as well. And do we have a third as well? And one at the back. Right. We'll take all three then as well.
Thanks very much. Kind of a similar question to actually what's just been asked, but how often do you come into contact with policymakers and what kind of influence can you have, if any at all, and does that frustrate you?
And then, Matt, there was a lady just towards the back there.
Got two kind of questions. So
I'll never remember four.
Don't worry, I'll remind you what they are.
I find coming from a science background, there's quite a gap between scientists and policymakers, and do you think there's kind of a lot of job opportunities for somebody to come from a science background and work more with policy so you can interact with both people kind of better? And do you have any advice for getting to that interview stage, past that initial recruitment phase where you've got all your relevant skills on your CV and you've done your cover letter man-made to that specific company? What can make you stand out for the other 300 applicants going for the same job?
Great questions. So I'm just going to remind the panel what they are. If I get it wrong, you can howl with outrage. And I suggest the panel, just so we've maybe got time to get through them all, pick the questions that you feel you want to answer the most. So there were 4 questions, actually. Do you ever get frustrated? We mean in a work sense. And how do you deal with that? How much interaction do you have in your roles with policymakers? What's that like? How much influence do you have? So the frustration point, how you deal with it, policymakers, and then a 2-part question. One was around, is there a role, what is the role for science into policy and that thing? And then finally, how do I get a job? How do I get to that next bit? Come on, help me. And I think you all have to answer that last one. So, Daisy, which one's?
The government, the policymaker one. It's an interesting one. And yes, I get frustrated every day because you want to make change, you want it to happen now, you see the damage that's being caused across the world, but then you pick your battles. You have to pick your battles and you have to push slowly and push hard where you can. In terms of policy, we work to Transport Scotland, which is an agency of Scottish Government, and we fund it through them. 90% of our funding comes through them. We meet the senior civil servants very regularly, so at least once every 2 weeks, especially during the funding season and talking about what projects are coming up. We meet the Minister of Transport, Mr. Hamza Yusuf at the moment, He's the Minister of Transport and the Islands once every 3 months to talk about, again, challenges and how we're doing with public money. And that's only happened in the past year, 2 years, where our funding has significantly increased. So there's more scrutiny and there's more, we're more responsible for public money. Before that, I've had, since my time in Sustrans, there's been 3 transport ministers. We've had Mr. Keith Brown, Mr. Derek Mackay, and now Mr. Hamza Yusuf. And luckily, all 3 of them got active travel. The funding is still very, very low. It's just under 1% of the complete transport budget. And we're pushing for 10% of transport budget to be on active travel. So, yes, but not enough.
Okay.
That's the short answer,
yeah,
sorry.
that's great. That's great. Amanda?
So yeah, we also work very closely with policy makers and influence decisions. I mean, we're obviously funded by the Scottish Government, but we are sort of sometimes the on-the-ground voice for businesses or organisations who want to feed into regulations. When the Waste Scotland regulations came in, we worked a lot with businesses to make sure that these were that the infrastructure was on the ground for this regulation to be achievable. There's also a food waste target has been set recently by the Scottish Government to reduce food waste by 33% by 2025. So we're now working with a lot of organisations to try and identify how that could actually be achieved, so we can feed that back to the Scottish Government, so when they're introducing new policies or a new food waste bill, then they can plan that around what is achievable or what is really possible, or even plan ahead for the infrastructure that's needed before that can come about. So we are quite answerable to them, but also feed into their policies. The circular economy strategy for Scotland was very much sort of led by ourselves, and also there's a UK bioeconomy strategy has just come out, so we feed into that from a UK point of view. Even though waste is a devolved issue, we can still have a kind of say in the wider thing. So yeah, we definitely feed into that, and really in that respect, although a lot of the people at Zero Waste Scotland have a waste interest, then there's no reason why they can't. You know, there is a waste policy team, and their expertise, just sort of coming back to your question, their expertise is policy and strategy. So they don't necessarily need to know about waste management, but there is, you know, sort of, you could come in sort of round that back door kind of thing. Also in terms of how to be successful in an interview. For me anyway, when I'm interviewing people, I think, it's brilliant if someone comes in and they have all the desirable. I mean, definitely go through the application form and make sure that you hit all the essential criteria, because that you'll get ruled out sort of in most recruitment processes if you don't meet one of the essentials. But often, you know, if you get the opportunity for the interview, be enthusiastic about it, because that counts for a lot more than just being able to prove you can do it on paper. If you're kind of interested in what you're saying, or you get them interested in what you're saying, or you just are enthusiastic, I think counts for a lot.
Handy tip is if you're coming to a job with me, don't do what a candidate did once, which is both doubt my integrity and my abilities and the purpose of my own department. But she was quite keen to work there. She didn't get the job. Robert.
Yeah, I guess I'll start on the jobs bit, since we're on that. I guess I think on the actual application bit, if it's a CV and a cover letter, I mean, on the CV, obviously you want to demonstrate you're meeting all the criteria, basically, so as much tailored to job description as you can. But I guess the cover letter, I suppose, is the one bit where you can show you're really enthusiastic and, you know, what you're looking to achieve and what you hope the job will allow you to do. And that's, I suppose, the bit that if we're looking at an application, we get a bit more of an idea about the person and which ones might be, more likely to be interviewed. But I mean, it's really hard to, to get that. And I guess the interview bit as well, just being really enthusiastic and sort of focused in on the particular opportunity and trying to find out, I suppose, beforehand as much as you can exactly what the role is. Because I know our one, for instance, they just advertise sustainability positions for graduates across the UK, and they'll be all a bit different in which office it is, and you can find out if you get in touch with people who think a little bit more about them, and then that probably really helps if you're sort of tied into something specifically that location is looking for. And the policy one, We do some work on policy, typically as a big engineering consultancy in the private sector. Our work is what our clients pay us to do at the end of the day. So if we win some work for someone that wants to look at policy, we'll certainly do that. So things like we've worked with people on new iterations of building regulations to try and reduce energy use through means like that, and just now we're looking at supporting planning process to encourage district heating and an aspect of the policy relating to that. Outside of what we're sort of paid to do as our main day job, if we're working on projects, for instance, say on district heating, and we sort of spot something that might be an opportunity to improve things, we can feed that back to various people in Scotland. Zero Waste Scotland, some of the people there are very well connected into the government for things like that. In England and Wales, it's maybe different people and different departments would speak to, but there is definitely opportunity to sort of feed things back for sort of practical things. And I think this comes where the science role comes in, because really a lot of what we feed in is when people are looking for some more detailed engineering or scientific type analysis to support the policy. So if someone challenges them on it, they can sort of say, well, we've done all this research on it, and it sort of showed that the option we're proposing makes most sense. And that is really essential for a lot of things. People want to be able to justify their decisions, and they want to have strong evidence for that. And that, I think, is probably the key bit where the scientific approach helps.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robert. Andy?
I was just going to touch on the interview thing. I might have picked it up incorrectly. I thought the question was a little bit more to do with how do you get to a point of having an interview rather than the actual interview itself. And something that's been touched on by a couple of people tonight is the importance and value of networking. And that's to do with interpersonal skills. So getting to know someone a little bit better before that opens a door to having the opportunity for an interview, and I think that's critically important. I was going to focus more on the question of how do you have you ever managed to do anything radical or your radical change? And I suppose from a building's perspective, I would kind of turn that in its head a little bit and just say, well, is there anything wrong with actually trying to do something well? And where I'm getting at from a sustainability viewpoint, a lot of buildings have got various forms of badges which tell you how well they're performing environmentally, how much energy they're using. But more often than not, that's a prediction, it's not an actual figure. And one of the things which I would argue is important to do is a kind of slightly unusual term which is called post-occupancy evaluation. It's going into a building afterwards and doing both quantitative and qualitative assessments of how the building's performing. And we've done that. The university's been very keen to do that. We've probably the building we've spent most time doing that on is the informatics forum. But I always remember the first building we did that on was the headquarters for Wessex Water, which is just outside Bath. And it was heralded in the architectural press at the time as the greenest office building in the UK. And we were sort of hoping that it was, because the client was very forward thinking. They were a water utilities company. They wanted, low energy. Then there was lots of water related environmental aspects as well, which is no surprise. But we were very keen to go in and actually find out how the building was actually performing against the predicted figures, which was heralded as, this is the greenest office building. And the figures were off the scale. So it's like, what's going on here? So there was a period of about 3 years of, I guess, falling into, broadly speaking, 3 different categories. One was educating the people who are using the building to use the building as it was supposed to be used. Another one was recommissioning bits of equipment that had not been commissioned properly in the first place. And the third was patching up holes in the building that had not been constructed properly. And so over, little by little, over a period of time, the building energy figures came down to match those which had been predicted. But unless you go in and do that, you'll never find out. So I guess that was the radical thing, is to go in and find out how your building is actually performing, because more often than not, when a building's finished, everyone runs for the hills. Where's the next one?
Excellent. I'm sure there are more questions, but I'm afraid we've already run out of time, and I've got a few more things left to do. Hopefully some of the panel are staying. I certainly am for the wine, so grab people afterwards, don't be shy. I can't resist answering one or two. It's really bad, Jeremy, but a couple of points about the questions is, on the point of how do you make change? Well, there's a whole literature. Thousands of people write about how change happens in organisations and society. So read some of that and absorb it. It gives you a language to understand the fact that otherwise you can expend your own energy thinking it's all about you and you weigh yourself out. But you realise there are ways to make change in organisations. Understand the context of the organisation you're in as well. Do people deal with policies? Yes, I saw 2 MSPs last week and the Minister wrote to me thanking me for something. So in the right jobs, you will get interaction with policymakers. They need people. And how do you get through the stages? Well, first of all, give examples. I'm sure the career service will say that. Don't say, I'm an excellent communicator, because nobody else in the world ever says that. Oh, that's right. So give examples. I'm an excellent communicator because I can make change because I did this thing because. Don't just write generality, write specifics. And then I would say also remember it's a two-way thing. If you go into the place and you don't like the boss, or you don't like the place, or you don't like the job, remember it's a two-way. Don't do what I did necessarily and take the first job that someone offers to you. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. We're just going to hear a little bit about ECOWeek before we finish. So, yes, do please come up and you'll hear more about the rest of ECOWeek.
Hi guys, thank you very much for coming. I'm from the Career Service. So you've made the first step, which is obviously coming to this event. If you're interested in careers in the environment or careers in sustainability, we have this wonderful week of events. Just to give a little bit of a shout out to events that have spaces remaining. Careers in the Environment, which is on Wednesday up at KB. We've got some brilliant speakers coming from RSKW, Scottish Water, Civil Contingencies, the Met Office, and Scottish Environment Link. So I would definitely advise booking onto that if you want to hear more. As our panel have also said, networking is important. So, please do have a look on My Career Hub at the whole range of events that we have. This is your opportunity to meet with employers, to network, to find out about, what you can be doing now whilst you're still at university to set you on that career path. There is no one set career path, as you've heard from the panel. Find out more about what other people have done, network with those companies. So yes, please do check it out on My Career Hub. Just in terms of tonight, I just want to give a quick shout out to our exhibitors that are just outside. When we're done here, there'll be a chance to grab a drink, network more with our speakers, but also our exhibitors. So just in order, we've got BIFA, Bright Green Placements, Till Hill, Con4, Egger, Friends of the Earth, Scotland, Changeworks, Home Energy Scotland, Keep Scotland Beautiful, Student Recruitment and Admissions, and I hope I haven't missed anyone, but if I have, please do, network with them, find out, ask your questions, to them as well, about policy, about what you can be doing to stand out in interview, and how to go about making the radical change that you are all capable of. And then just lastly, what you can be doing after this week, please do come see the Career Service. We have lots and lots and lots of things that we do. Your question about how to stand out at interview or how to get to interview, that is stuff that we can help you out with. We do one-to-one careers guidance. We can chat through your options. We have lots of information and resources on the labour market. We can provide you with mock interviews. So, if you have found a company you want to work for, you've got that interview in the bag, come see us, have a run through. We can give you advice on how to, really, really hone it and do the best that you can do. We have events throughout the week. We've compiled them here for ECOWeek, but we do run careers in the environment and sustainability. We run events on those topics year round. So check out My Career Hub, book on to those, as well as just check out My Career Hub for job opportunities. You've made the first step by coming here. Look at volunteering, look at what you can be doing now, as well as look at what you can do in terms of graduate schemes. We advertise hundreds of vacancies a week, so check out My Career Hub. And lastly, I'm just going to pass you over and just say thank you very much all for coming. If you have any questions for myself or for anyone here, please come grab me at the end.
Excellent,
all right?
thanks.
Thank you.
One more minute. I know you're just wanting to get drinks. I just want to say thank you very much. I want to say thank you very much to our sound engineer at the back, and to Sarah on the camera, and Claire, who's hiding in the corner, who organised it, and also Matt Lawson. Also to Career Service colleagues. Particularly thank the panel, obviously, for it coming out on a Monday night and being willing to listen to your questions. Thank you for coming. Slightly corny, but I would finish in, for me, certain sectors, there are brilliant careers, and this is one of them. I think the sustainability has such brilliant careers that people can choose. And again, without sounding too corny, we kind of need you, really. We're not doing that well on sustainability globally, so there are real solutions out there. And it is literally one of these areas where the future's in your hands, really. Hey, old people used to say that sort of thing to me in the past. I think, oh, blah, blah. But in actually this area, I think absolutely there are opportunities there that are waiting to be seized and solved. So thank you very much for coming. We're now done. And if you want to go outside and mingle and ask for more questions, please do, and grab the panel if they're still around. Thanks very much.